2 interim emergency requests for funding from the library and Public Works. And we do have listed here the Board of Education additional appropriation for Central Middle School and a bonding resolution to support that in the same amount. However, we have decided with our colleagues who had originally requested this meeting that we would have discussion and vote being deferred to the full BET meeting, since that meeting is scheduled for 6 PM our same day. So that's later today at 6 PM. So I will repeat that when we get to those items, but I wanted to let anyone who might be listening or watching us just know in advance that there will be no discussion nor votes on CMS at this particular meeting. Laura?
I just wanted to add that we wanted to be efficient with the professional team and all the architects and construction managers, so we felt a better use of time.
Correct. And, this was just an alert, and, so that if anyone thought they were going to watch for that, they would be disappointed later on. So we're trying to mitigate that action at this point. But you're right, for those reasons. So the first item that we're going to hear is from the library, and it's a request for $33,000 additional appropriation, and this is for their boiler system. This was financed out of our ARPA project money, our American Rescue Plan project money. And so, again, this is being presented as also to continue. This additional funding would also be from our ARPA fund, and it will come from the administrative expenses account, which is currently budgeted for finance, and this will reduce that account by $33,000 and obviously finance this project. The point of this being, is my understanding from finance, that they don't think that they will need the full $100,000 that's currently budgeted, and there's also timeframes involved and so forth, so that's how we're going to proceed. That obviously is a worry that we have not, or whatever, that we have not you, but just kind of explaining that to the public. So, would you like to also introduce your accompanying visitors, please?
Thank you, Leslie. So I'm obviously Joe Williams, director of the library. So with me is Kate Soboleva. She is the deputy director of the library, as well as Mr. John Elliott. He is our facilities manager. They've been managing this project since the inception, and obviously we've had some challenges with that project, so we appreciate any support from the BET and the town regarding this project. We would be happy to answer any questions concerning the project, but generally speaking, we've had some issues with the contractor, went out of contract. It's now being handled by the law department, and we got emergency authorization to proceed with a new vendor, but obviously there had been price escalations in the meantime, so this is to cover that shortfall.
Thank you. And you provided some additional documentation in the package explaining the reasons for the request.
Yes, that's correct. That package was forwarded over to Roland, and I believe he might have forwarded on to you, or at least I assume so.
That's correct. I mean, and it's part of our posted package, so just explaining that. So do we have any questions? Laura?
Thanks, everybody. I just want to know, what's the timeline if you get this appropriation and then it needs to go to the RTM? When do you need to have this boiler online, and when will this allow you to do that for heating season?
I'm going to defer this over to Kate and John to respond to with the specifics of the project.
Hello, good afternoon.
So welcome, John.
Thank you.
I think your first
Oh, yes, yes.
budget committee meeting.
Yes. We'd like to see it online as soon as possible. This boiler is responsible for heating a good portion of the building. So we'd like to move everything forward as soon as possible. Hope that answers your question.
So related to that question from Ms. Erickson, it appeared that you were found out about this earlier, right? Is that correct? I mean, from the documentation, and so, why did you wait until now to come in I mean, if we didn't have a special meeting, we would have to have a special meeting.
Right, because it was in dispute until, as we got over the fiscal year, and then it was all through the summer, we were in the middle of this dispute with the law department, and we were seeking guidance from the town. So a lot of it was just us trying to get through this process that brought us to here now.
Thank you. Leslie, you had a question?
Yeah, first, just also related to the gap, if the RTM can't hold a special meeting, because that would be deferred till mid-December before you would get the authorization to move forward, can you make arrangements for a temporary heating for the building, or do you think you can get through till early December?
Would you like to respond to the heating?
We won't be able to get, through. There are temporary measures that we can do, and we will be incurring additional expenses from our operating budget to do so. But we can't do nothing. We can't delay on our end.
Right, so you do have a plan to heat the building in the interim. It's just incremental expense that could be avoided if you get the authorization sooner.
Yes.
Okay. And just, I want to make sure there's enough contingency in the amount that you've requested for potentially other expenses that you haven't identified. The one thing I saw in the proposal said that things are being left paint-ready. I don't know if there are other expenses that you're planning to cover elsewhere, or whether you need some additional contingency in what you're asking for today.
No, the additional expenses are accounted for.
Everything's in here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Nisha, you're fine? Okay. So, are we ready to take a vote? So do I have a motion? I'm sorry? Oh, Jeff has a question. Jeff?
If that's all right, I had two questions,
I'm
if I
sorry,
can.
I didn't see your hand.
It's really to Pete, I think, more than anything else. Pete, the interest that the ARPA funds generates, does that come in just as general revenues of the town, or are we identifying those as being ARPA funds also?
All of the expenses are in the F fund called the grant fund. The interest that is being earned is being credited to the F fund, the grant fund. We're up about $850,000 for now. That we did a research on that, the eligible cost. We could spend it on anything. Potentially, for example, if you wanted to transfer it to the general fund to take pressure off the budget, you can do that. But right now, there has not been a final decision on what to do with the interest income.
Okay. And second and last question. So there was, as I recall, $100,000 of the ARPA funds that we set aside for administrative expenses. You're taking these funds out of that $100,000?
That's correct. There's 100,000. We journal vouchered $20,000 last year for audit expenses, and we don't, after this year and next, we don't expect to spend the whole 100,000. So the 33,000 will be charged to this, that account will be reduced by the 33,000.
Leaving
And this
40 some
account
odd?
will.
Leaving 40 some, and you think the 40 some odd is more than sufficient for
Yes.
what you expect?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So now I'll ask, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve an additional appropriation of $33,000 to the ARPA Act funds for the library.
And do
I
we
will
have a?
second, yeah.
And Nisha, we're seconding. So this is a bit complicated. Is this a routine or a non-routine?
Actually, it's an additional appropriation to the libraries fund with a reduction to the administrative line within ARPA. That I don't want to imply that the total ARPA fund allocation is changing. So is this routine or not routine? I would say the item is routine. Dan may have an opinion on that.
And so,
Yeah, since we have a special meeting tonight, and I did post as non-routine because we didn't have a vote yet, I think hopefully it'll be quick and non-controversial, but I think it has to stay on as non-routine. I would note, and I did, I think, mention to Roland and Pete, I don't believe the staff needs to, or the advocates need to show up. tonight, but I think we do need to take a non-routine vote, a non-routine vote, okay?
Thank you. So that's really what I was getting at, whether you would have to show up this evening. So even though it will be routine, we've just heard that you don't have to return for the 6 o'clock meeting.
On behalf of the library, thank you.
So we're going to have to vote first. So those in favor of motion by Ms. Moriarty, second by Ms. Aurora, okay, that vote is 4-0-0, it's unanimous, and you heard the discussion. So thank you very much, and good luck getting this done as soon as possible. How soon do you think you can get it done?
It won't take us too long once it's rolling with, yeah.
Great, thank you, good luck.
Okay, thank you.
I need the special meeting.
Roland, I think we said we expected Amy to come, is that correct? And we don't see her at the moment. I wrote- So we're taking a minor break while we're waiting for Ms. Siebert, the Commissioner of Public Works, to join us. So she has provided a very detailed sheet for us, correct, Roland? So it was just delivered. Since this is a bit complicated, I really don't want to begin this until Commissioner Siebert arrives, unless someone wants to begin. Guess not. Pete, while we're waiting, at your convenience, since this really tells us a lot about the remediation and what's been done and what's going on, do you think we could just post this additional page to the section for the Budget Committee? In addition, not putting it in the packet, but just says additional information for the public? Does that make sense? The Budget Committee section? Yeah. Okay, at your convenience. Right, so that, because there's a lot, well, since it wasn't with the package, it was just delivered now, but it's got a lot of good information and explanatory information in terms of, what's been happening and the additional appropriations that were required. We approved one in September. Thank you. Maybe Amy went out to lunch. Now we've lost Amy and Roland. Ah, there's the team. So, Amy, we'll just now, once you get yourself settled, we'll just comment that this is PW2, which is the Public Works Department. It's an additional appropriation requested by Public Works for $750,000 for additional work for the Greenwich High School remediation project at the site.
Right.
And
So,
you've given us some additional information, but quite frankly, we really haven't had enough time to study.
you haven't had time to go through it, and we just got it hot off the presses, so thanks for being so patient to go through this. So as you know,
And I should add that this is Amy Siebert, our Commissioner of
sorry.
Public Works.
all right. All right, anything else? We got protocol here. I did get my shoes changed to come down here and see you, so you didn't have to stare at my sneakers down here, but, okay. As you folks know, we came in September because as we've done this work across the summer in this phase of work, as we were dealing with Field 5, which is the softball field, and Field 2, the baseball field, so Field 2 is the one closest to Cardinal Stadium. As we began going through those fields, what you have to do when you excavate is you have to sample the bottom of your excavation and the sides. Just a little review for anybody who might be listening or a little refresher. Those sample results tell you whether you can backfill the hole or whether you have to take out more material. So, as we discussed in September, what we had found as we were getting through August was that we were finding, particularly in Field 2, more material that needed to come out. Now, yes, we had done a great deal of sampling across that site. Yes, we had a lot of characterization. But when you dig these holes, one of the ways I tried to explain it, it's like you can find seams of material, seams of poor material. So you've done these borings before, now you've done the excavation, and you can find this material. If you have PCBs in it, you have to get it out of there, depending on if the concentration is above a certain amount. There are times where if you have other contaminants, you may be able to leave material behind depending on depth and concentration and mobility criteria and things like that. But when you got PCBs, you follow them and you take them out. So the extent of the excavations, and I can come up in a minute and show you a couple, I have a couple pictures that I just got today. This one will show you a little bit, even if I hold this up for you a little bit, and then I'm happy to come and explain these. This is Field 2 here. Now, you see the bright yellow. The areas we had, if I'm reading this right, make sure I'm reading it right myself, the areas that we had anticipated excavating to various depths were these paler colors, like this pale green and blue and pink. So we've had these step outs as we've opened up more and had to take more material out. Right now, we're over here. We've got this all set to the best of my knowledge. We've got a couple little spots in here, and we're dealing with some things in here. So the amount of material that has had to go out is on the order of, right now, where we're at is 14,262 tons. We had anticipated somewhere around 6,500, 7,000 tons when we had done the original design work. So with all that as background, right, we got the additional funds, thank you, town.
I'm sorry, does this memo have that in there?
It has that number in here.
Okay.
In September, when we came, we were talking, we had different numbers, obviously. As work continued through September and here through October, you know, every week it's, how are the samples? 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 And we're still finding we have some areas we're still chasing. So what does that mean? So what that means is because we don't want to be in a situation where we can't pay the bills, we have a choice before us. And that choice is that we could decide at this point in time to say, we don't want to do an interim appropriation. We want to, you want to tell Public Works and the team out there to use the funds that we have and make them go as far as we can. Ideally, take, you know, what would be ideal, right, would be to get all the soil out, stabilize the field, because we wouldn't have the money to restore it just yet, but stabilize it so that while it's rained on and snowed on this winter, it's not, soil isn't going hither and yon. But stabilize it and take care of it next summer, put it in the capital budget. That is an option, certainly. I want to be upfront about that. I can understand if people say, we don't want another interim appropriation. We'll do that. There is some uncertainty moving forward. We've done the best, so we've asked for 750,000. We've done the best we can. I'm not, like the last time, can't guarantee it, but done the best we can to try to estimate on this from what we know out there and what they're seeing in some of the step outs. Additional soil removal, what's going to happen here is we're going to run out of weather as well. We've been talking as a team that if we get back good results this week and all, we've got maybe, another week or maybe tops 2 weeks of taking material out. If we got good results, then we could roll right into that business of getting the grading, the sod, you know, the topsoil down, obviously all the backfilling and everything else, but the grading, the sod, and working on that because we can do that, weather permitting again, on into like the Thanksgiving period in early December. So if we have additional funds, that's what we're working towards. Again, what I'll say, I'll caveat that if we find that we're looking at this figure and some of the area we've not had to, we're moving in some of these spots here, we're moving, and we're hoping they won't connect. But we can't quite, you can't tell until you start getting in there and taking material out. We would let that money go as far as we could to get that soil out of there, to have it teed up for the next summer, if that makes sense, to have it prepared. So that's the unenviable position we find ourselves in today with this site. So we can all work together to try to make a decision about where we need to go with it. And what we laid out in here was that we estimated an additional approximately 1,800 tons or so of material to come out. We, are getting some samples this week that'll tell us a little bit more. We have, what else can I tell you that's in here? I think that's really the main summary. And what I tried to do on the table for you folks is, I know there was interest in, there's money in the budget unencumbered, where is it going? So what I did was I laid out in this table for you the amount of money we have encumbered to our on-site oversight and engineer for this project, as well as the contractor Charter. And what the expenses are estimated through the end of October here that we could cover. And then what that leaves us with as a difference, what we are requesting for the interim appropriation and what that would be used for to get us to the end. And you can see that it would take us down to pretty much nothing left in that account if it works out that way. Again, I want to be fair to everybody. If there is ongoing uncertainty with these numbers. We had been so hopeful with the prior thing in September, thinking, boy, we estimated already like 50% above what we already had, and look where we are today with those tons. The other thing I want to mention is we have had some questions from people saying, well, why didn't you do this differently? And you should have just built an artificial turf field or done all these other things. It would have been cheaper. It would not have been cheaper. The unfortunate part about this kind of work is it's not cheaper to have to go in and not only, we have to dig up this material and take it away because it has PCBs at certain concentrations in it that are above standards that we have to remove. We're leaving soil that does not have that. If you were going into this field, albeit you can see a lot of disturbance, there would have been even more soil removed. There would be a drainage system that would have to be put in place. There would be the expense of building an artificial turf field, which has a greater expense than putting sod back. So that's sort of that putting an artificial turf field was not part of the required environmental control for the nature of the contamination in this field. This is a lot like, if any of you folks remember when we were doing the William Street field over there by New Leb, and we had the same issue we found as we were sampling in that field and chasing, and that location was arsenic. We were finding the same thing. We were chasing it. We had done some characterization, and as you excavated, did those sidewalls, did the bottoms of the excavations, we found ourselves chasing that arsenic around and having to take out more than we had originally anticipated. There were some things, because it was arsenic, that allowed us to close that up more readily than a PCB situation. But it's interesting as we see this kind of activity. We saw a little of that at Byram with arsenic as well. You can sometimes be chasing this. It's difficult to forecast. So, but still cost effective to do it in that stepwise fashion, which again is frustrating when you run out of budget when you're in that many tons of soil.
Laura?
Thank you, Amy. I want to back up and say Leslie Tarkington and I are the liaisons to DPW, and last Wednesday we got an email from you alerting us of this situation. We were able to meet on Friday, and I wanted to just highlight that we had gone through some of this, but this is real-time information. I think we all are very supportive to get this project done. When I look at this chart, I think we can understand that there's more soil in terms of amount. It is good news that the characterization is not as hazardous as what we were talking about for the September interim. But there's also some elements here relating to time. And if you could walk us through some of those elements. I'm looking at the Phase 2 balancing order, if you could just describe what that is. If you could talk about the water treatment, talk about some of the other expenses, maybe for Phase 3, the October, the fence, the concrete, the flagging, the roadway, that
So-
type of thing. And then I think we also talked about, originally the plan was to do seed, but we've missed that season, so we're
Correct.
doing sod. But we always were going to do an irrigation system, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, maybe just walk through some of these
Sure,
elements.
sure. So what we've got, we're listing the additional, expenses that we have here. As we moved into this fiscal year, what we knew we had was, again, what we've seen every single year is that the amount of soil we've had to take out of each phase has been larger than originally anticipated. So with Phase 2, which was last year's work, last summer's work underneath Field 3, and other small areas like that, we took out more material and had, as a result, additional expenses under that work that we have to balance and close out. So we call it a balancing order. We finish that work, and what we're in the process of is negotiating the last details of what those items are to close out that phase. This year's work with Phase 2 and 5, this past summer, is Phase 3. Phase 3, we've got in here listed, we have additional soil removal and disposal, obviously. Water treatment is because as water is falling onto that site and filling up open excavations, we take that water and we run it through a treatment system. So we're capturing that water because it's potentially contaminated by the material it's up against when it's in a area that hasn't been fully cleared. So we have to take it and move it through that system. And of course, with the weather we've been having, it's a darn good thing we have it, because the contractor has been finding, right, after these weekends, they come in and they can't even excavate, they've got to be pumping water, and getting the excavation back open. But we put that water through a treatment system. So that's something that we've needed to have. We did not anticipate needing as much of a system this season. We didn't expect some of the excavations to be as deep as some of them were. We had to chase material down and over, and we've had a wet weather. The field irrigation system is, we've disturbed so much of Field 2, and we knew that was coming. And also, in order to get the irrigation system up in the clean layer, we needed to put in a new irrigation system for Field 2. So we've been carrying that expense. We just haven't encumbered it to the contractor. We use the town's contractor for that. And when we're listing other expenses, there have been, we've had fence repairs we've had to do. We write the flagging and things in there. There was some concrete that was discovered when we were doing an excavation in one area that had to be removed. It was some concrete pad buried under a couple feet of soil in Field 2. No one has any idea why, but there have been some miscellaneous repairs, removals, and in addition, the soil, because we're removing soil while school's in service, what they asked is for, and we all know or maybe some folks have the good fortune to have never had to go into the Greenwich High School parking lot, but I think you folks are familiar with it. It is a very busy parking lot, to put it mildly, right? So we have had to, the contractor has had to add additional controls and labor to even be making sure that the trucks are getting loaded and exiting safely. They have an extra buggy that has to make sure it's going around with the vehicles and all, to make sure there's no interaction with students and vehicles, or we don't want any safety issues. So there are things like that. Additional efforts with that. Obviously, by taking this additional time, we all hoped we'd be off-site. We have to have our inspector out there making sure of what's going on. We've had additional sampling, obviously, because we've got all these excavations open. So there have been a lot of those types of expenses. Those are the typical day-to-day expenses that come along with getting this work done that we have to take into account as we keep moving it forward.
Okay. Leslie?
No, I just wanted to add, this project's going to cost what it's going to cost. So you gave us two options, which is to defer this to the spring. And your time frame for completing the project may be dictated by weather as much as money in this case. But from my perspective for this board, the funds are needed. The funds are put into account for this particular project. You still have another phase to complete. Is that right, or is this the end?
We do have some work next summer. We can always be surprised by the regulators in future.
Right.
Careful to
Right, so
always say that,
I'd
but-
be inclined to support the appropriation, and, then it's a matter of dealing with the RTM to figure out what their timing could be and the timing when you might need the funds. But let me ask you a question as far as contingency in this budget, because you do work down to to 13,000, if I'm doing the math correctly, of left in the budget, and whether it's appropriate to consider a little bit more that we could condition if we wanted to as a board, just so it wouldn't require both steps if it were needed, if you considered that.
It's always welcome. It's been very difficult to try to forecast this and to figure out just how much more are we going to need to take out. What we are going to run up against is weather. We will run up. So we were as a team, we've been talking about this and how much more work can we actually do before we need to just close up shop and stabilize the site. So in trying to be reasonable, this is the figure we've come up with. If there's the ability to create some kind of contingency on top of it, I sure as heck wouldn't want to find out that we were off by 50 grand and could have gotten the darn field ready for the spring, because December turned out to be warm and toasty. because more of the questions I've been getting are, is the darn field going to be ready? No one's worried about the remediation, which is a good thing, because we don't want them worried, but people want their field back, which we understand.
There's a follow-up question, too. Is there a timing issue in the spring? Would you start earlier if you had funds available?
I think what would be very difficult is that in the spring, and probably there are others here who can speak to baseball season better than I about how early it starts. And the hard part is getting that sod on there and getting it established. So that's where we work closely with Parks, who would tell us they were looking at it, and it'd be a lot more ideal, right, to be putting the sod on now than in November, or even you start to look in December and you're like, are you wasting your money? Are you going to get a freeze and a snow on it? And I would have to grab Tim Coughlin and Joe Sis and go, but if you have a great forecast, are you okay? So we tried to do something where we were sort of anticipating we're going to get to a point here where we're like, we got to fish or cut bait when it comes to field restoration. If we can't get these darn excavations done. I mean, even the team has been trying to figure out, could we get the bulk of it done, and just leave a little bit? We don't have enough samples to be able to tell you that today, because it was like, well, if we can feel reasonably comfortable that we've got just maybe a couple small areas that we still have to get out that might take a couple weeks, but the rest of the field we could get rocking and rolling on, we could do that. Is contingency helpful for us being able to make a decision like that? Absolutely. But I was trying to get, I can shoot myself in the foot for trying not to ask for too much. I don't know what to tell you.
So Nisha, do you mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, you mentioned that it's hard to estimate this, right, because of the seams that you potentially could run into, and it looks like you estimated 12,000 and it's closer to 14,000, or are those numbers right? I'm just having a hard time following this
We had gotten out, around 10,000 and change, and then we estimated about that, because about another 1,800
Right.
or so. And we tried to estimate that as high hazard waste, which is more expensive, which is why we were able to get to 14,000, where are we at, 268?
Yeah.
But
So I was just I think Leslie Moriarty was also was trying to understand this also. What is kind of the risk in the new estimate? Like, is it that when you're digging, it's deeper, or is it that you're going more across? Like, how do we get to a stronger,
So that's
a better estimate?
Well, the only way you get to a stronger and better estimate, unfortunately, is by digging the holes and sampling. So what's tricky is our folks tried to look at, let me see, they were looking at this area, because our step outs at this point are in this area, and we're worried about, are we going to, in theory, connect the yellow areas here? We're good, it's my understanding, if we go, sorry, I should wait the right way. Actually, I think we're okay over here. I'd need to go back to my, some more detailed drawings. I think we're all working in over here. But they're trying to estimate the areas where we've had those step outs and look at, well, if it's X area, worst case, 2 feet, this many more tons, that's what you're up against. Is your seam going up and you need a shallow excavation of a foot or two, or is it going down and then you're stuck with taking out 3 or 4 feet for a greater distance? And then that's more expensive, right? That's going to be more tons.
Is it obvious when you're digging? Is it like when you're digging? Can you see? Okay, this is bad
Sometimes
soil
they
and
can,
this is good soil.
sometimes.
Yeah.
You can't always see it, though. So that's another thing that makes it very entertaining. You'll have an excavation, you look at it, you and I would look at it and go, this looks great. You don't smell anything, you don't see anything.
So you're constantly sampling as you're
But
digging?
you have to sample, they take the samples in accordance with the regulations with the, the proper distances and quantities, and take them off. And I'll be honest with you, the other thing that if you think about it, right? You could have, the unfortunate thing about bad fill is you can have a small bit of bad fill, and was your sample here, or was it here? And was this the bad bit, or did you get lucky and your sample was here? You are trying to take a representative sample.
Right.
But even with all that, you can have the time where you take a sample and
Yep.
you got unlucky and you got the one that, now, I say that, it makes it sound like I want to leave something bad behind. You know, it's just the nature of
Yeah.
sometimes the kind of material you have in that fill and how it is dispersed. It's not even and always easy to see and easy to predict.
Right, I assume you're following a protocol, right?
Right,
So as long as you follow
absolutely.
the process, you might have false negatives, false positives. and
You can
you'll
have all kinds of
deal,
things that
right,
you're taking, that's why you're taking multiple samples, and you've got all kinds of controls around that whole process to make sure that you're getting the right data back from the lab and everything else. So followed to the letter, and time consuming.
And then one more question. I'm just trying to visualize what this looks like. So 14,000 tons of soil, is that like 14, is it 1 ton goes on a truck? Like how many trucks are going
Oh,
back
I
and
have to
forth?
get you that number. It's
I mean, this seems like a big number. Right?
It's an enormous number. We were all talking about that, and I never remember the right amount. I need my lifeline for the guys and be like, how many trucks is this? You know,
And you're
it's-
taking these trucks somewhere, I assume, where you're allowed to deposit?
Correct. They'll usually take them to rail cars, and then it's heading off, you know, frequently to Michigan.
And then the new clean soil that you're going to put in, is that going to be done, is that being done concurrently? Is that the way you're describing it?
When we can,
Yeah.
yes. We've got areas like Field 5 right now. The good thing is in Field 5, they can move forward with going ahead, and they've been backfilling, and they're continuing to backfill, and they'll get that one restored. And there are areas on Field 2 that have been backfilled. It's just not everywhere yet, unfortunately. So if you were to go out there and look at it, it looks like something exploded out there. I mean, it's just like holes and dirt and
Okay. No, I didn't really have any specific questions on the budget. I'm just trying to visualize how big of a project this really is. And-
yeah.
It's huge. So Amy, I have 2 questions, hopefully they're quick. So for the, over 14,000 tons of soil that needed to be remediated, there's also approximately the same amount of clean fill that needed to be brought in. So it's really, when we look at, to Nisha's point, when we look to the trucks and the movement, you're really talking double the amount because you have to bring in the clean fill too.
Right, which is a very good point, which is, again, more of those expenses, and thank you, since you folks were asking me to clarify that. That's, again, part of the whole process is it's not just the expense of excavating, transporting, and disposing of the soil. It's that additional material that has to come in to fill the holes as part of the additional funding.
So I have one other question that I think we asked last week, and I don't know where this is here. One of the questions that I asked Amy was to make sure that you have sufficient money to design, engineer, whatever we call it, for the fiscal year 25 budget that you'll be requesting for the GHS remediation in February. And so in this, because I don't see it segmented out, you have sufficient money for the design work and the engineering work to craft out fiscal year 25 remediation for the,
I think, again, that would be...
I'm coming back to Leslie's question too, kind of
Right,
blending
right.
the 2 things.
Right, no, it's a good question. We'd be extremely tight because, again, we're having to use the funds for the oversight now. We expect it to be buttoned up, right? So we're having to use the funds we have for AECom to keep them out there and do our inspection work and so on and so forth. We did a fair amount of work on that last year, but we had to remove it from this past summer's work, as you folks may recall, because we couldn't get the approvals for it in time. So that there's some potential risk there as well, probably.
I have, you haven't put it down here, but, how much does this design engineering, the preparation, what I'm talking about is the preparation for the budget process primarily, and to get, obviously to get through fiscal year 24. I mean, my question, I think it's leading the same way Leslie was asking, just asking it from a different point of view. Is there sufficient funds in here for the fiscal 25 design engineering work? And, are you going, at this point, do you think you might have to come back, or is it, again, I don't know, I'm asking.
Right. Good question. I would feel better if I had more, no question. I think what's going to be tricky about it, and I can go back between now and 6 o'clock and look at some figures about that. What's going to be tricky is whether the regulators ask for yet more redesign or whether we can move forward with what we put before them. We have put a great deal of information before them for the next phase. But I have to double check how far we went with, we would probably not have, since we pulled it, we wouldn't have put it together in the form of the bid documents yet, because again, we wouldn't want to do that, get too far down that
Right,
road.
because you need to get this done.
Until we get their approval. So I can certainly get some more information on that in the
Would you
next
want
couple
an
of hours.
Order of magnitude, do you have an idea? I mean, you'd have a chance to refine the number, but.
I think it's smarter if I go back and look at some of that. Because again, we're a little bit of this is, if sitting here and now we're hearing like, okay, I could have come down here and y'all could have said, you know what, let's just pack it up. Like close it up in the end of October. And then that's one scenario, right? And I'd be in probably pretty good shape then to move that stuff forward, because there'd be funds we could shift out of irrigation and restoration and so forth and say, okay, we're good. But if we think we're trying to get forward, I can ask some additional questions here, because all of it, our AECom team has been scrambling right along with me as we're looking at this, trying to figure that out.
I mean, if you can, I'd rather keep it to doing as much of the discussion in this meeting as possible, just because I think the later meeting will.
Well, if you'd like, you can, I think you have another item on your agenda. I can always go see if they're,
No, I think actually.
I thought-
we're
I'm
not-
sorry, I thought you had-
So,
At one time,
so I
sorry.
think, Laura, I know your hand has been up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify on the professional expenses. Are we capitalizing those design fees, or is that part of our?
yeah, they're in the
They're all
capital
in the
budget.
capital
Yep.
project?
Yep.
I mean, so just for context, last week when Leslie and I met with you on Friday, we were talking about a number of 450.
Right.
And we urged you, and you went back and you really scrubbed with your team, and here we are at 750.
Yep.
So, and we had talked about the concept of having an additional amount available in case you run into more issues, whatever they may be, and have that piece be subject to a report or an update. And I would be much more comfortable with that kind of structure, given all the variables that we're discussing, weather just being one of them. So I don't want to put forward a number, but I would think, I would like to see an amendment to this to a different number with that extra tranche being subject to release based on an updated report,
So,
if that makes sense.
so just talking with you, Amy also commented that she wanted to go back and look at things before we did this. So, I don't want to put too much time of this into this evening's discussion, but would it be better for Amy to approve what's been presented? Because we do know that they've spent a tremendous amount of time working on this, and it was only delivered, I'm going to say, a few minutes before our meeting started this afternoon, but clearly they've been working on it for the rest of Friday, because they hope to get it done Friday over the weekend and, for the last day and a half. So I guess where I'm more comfortable is going ahead with this, but if Amy looks like, and this is a question to you, Laura, comes back with, can send us an email with additional information that's supportable, I guess if you made a motion later on to do this, I would be happy to support it, but I'd rather have it come with supportable information.
If you give me a second, let me see. if
Oh,
I-
you have someone watching television and doing extra work?
No, I know if I can find it quick.
While she's looking up that number, alternative, I think I'd almost prefer to go the other way, because if we condition the funds, and if the RTM is willing to meet on the library item, they may be able to meet on this item as well, is to identify a number that's conditioned, and we wouldn't release it without the backup information that they need it for design money, or they need it for
Well,
additional
that's what
funds.
that's what I was
Which
suggesting.
is what I
But that's
started
what-
down that path too.
But that I was suggesting, but just, I think, since if Amy doesn't have this information now, what I was suggesting is that we approve what she has here now, but be open to an amendment at 6 o'clock to do exactly what you're saying. But I think it's better if we get Amy's input to that. I would support that, but.
But what
I'd
I'm
rather have
saying is we
input.
may not get documentation by 6 o'clock. So.
We
you
could
know,
ask Amy if we
We
could.
could still move forward with a verbal number, but I think for this committee not to be on record saying, let's approve an additional amount that's conditioned for these purposes and would be released upon documentation.
I mean, what are we basing the additional amount on?
Because it's going to be based on actual data when it gets released.
No, I understand, but I
think-
mean, you can put, are we going to put 1 million, 10 million, like you could.
I was thinking like 200,000. So
mean,
to go from 750 to 850 for potentially more contamination for this particular phase, and 100,000 for design documents for next year. Don't know whether, and Amy can comment whether that's in the ballpark or not.
I mean, my view here
Amy's
would.
doing some work right
My
now.
view here would
I'm
be that,
hunting.
yeah, well, the information we have in front of us, which has the data, is what we should approve. And I think this entire board is fully committed to making sure you get this right. And at any, if there's reason to believe that we need more, I think you should come back. It's also possible that we don't need the entire 750 now as well, right? Because that's also an estimate based upon current sampling. I just think there's so much variance in all of those numbers, but it's not to say that we're not supportive of if you need more. I think what you're hearing from this board is we get this done quickly, give your most reasonable estimate. My understanding is the 750 is the most reasonable estimate we have today. What the balance is, I mean, we can increase the number for randomly, but I'm not sure how that helps the discussion.
Maybe we could, since Joe Siciliano's here, I don't know, Joe, if you have any comments on the fields. We have $200,000 in here for the field restoration to make it ready. Sod, infield, minor grading. I don't know how closely you're working with Amy, or if you have anything to add to this conversation, but any light you can shed while Amy's scrambling with her team.
Yeah, I'm looking up, and I know that the field restoration figures we got were for addressing, once we got the excavations, it would be with all the excavations backfilled. It would be, and Joe, you can tell me the right terms you use, like scalping off the grass that's there. We have to do some minor regrading, and then, you lay that sod out on it, and you have to do the infield with the special materials that come for clay and things like that Joe knows.
And Amy's correct, she just told me what I would tell you is that there is that minor,
Microphone.
excuse me, there is that minor grading that has to be done. The field has to be set properly for grade and drainage. Irrigation system has to be placed, and then you'd have to put, the proper material to build up to the sod level so you can match what's existing. It's not an easy task, but it can get done. And I've seen winters where we have worked all the way up, laying sod all the way up till the first week of December. We did Havermeyer Field 10 years ago that way. And as far as your comment about sports in the fall, depends what snow does. I mean, that's really a controlling factor. I mean, I've seen kids out on those fields as early as the last week of March. So this whole process of not moving forward and holding it for another summer will disrupt a huge schedule for not only the high school sports, which are important to us because they will be displaced to other fields, meaning either JC or Havemeyer back here. It has this trickle effect on all of the other sports, including the ones that we sponsor at Parks and Recreation, the club sports that are out there, Babe Ruth, U11, U12, the people that use these bigger fields, they'll all be kind of, we'll make that path for the high school program, and then everybody else will get what's ever left over. It's not going to be a happy spring, I tell you that, if we go that route.
So thank you, Joe. I think that we have a very cooperative board here. We did all unanimously approve Amy's request in September. And Amy needs money. We're holding a special meeting now. We would have held it anyway to make sure this went through. I can't speak for the RTM. The RTM has to do what it needs to do. And I think in general, this board is very cooperative and supportive. There isn't any talk of holding up anything.
No,
Amy came
say
back
that.
to us
But I
and
think-
said
I think
now
there's-
she needs
There's
7.
an opportunity to finish right now. I mean.
And that's what we're working quickly on. And Amy, as the initial request, Joe, was 450,000.
I get it.
So this is coming back at
Well,
750,000.
that was an estimate. I want to be clear.
Right,
I mean,
right.
and that's why I can understand if somebody would say, look, because it keeps moving and changing, I hear what everybody's saying. I can we don't like making interim requests. But we also know that people really want that field done, and there are expenses associated with shipping the students, to this field and that field and the other field, that if they can't play on that field again. So it's a very difficult situation because we're asking for more money, and we may, or we're hopeful, but we could run into weather where we can't, as I said, where it could happen, where we can't get it, we can't get all the soil out, or we can't get enough sorted that we can get that sod back on there in time. So that's just I just want to be fair. I can understand all sides of the coin here, and I wish I could tell you the perfect number. And I think how much we hate coming in for interim.
So are you still looking at the numbers, Amy? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a figure for what we might be, where we might be. Because we have to, one of the things what we have to cover with our engineering team is our groundwater monitoring. We're going to be dealing with the regulatory coordination and all from the design update for the work for next summer, presuming everyone wants to see that work done next summer. At least if we can, if we can get a field done, the next phase of work, we can get done, but it's not a field. It's underneath concrete and asphalt. So that gives it a little more flexibility, as it were. It's not creating any operating issues at the moment. Right, so there's material that we need to take out that's underneath concrete and asphalt. So if that, for some reason, had to be delayed, it's not a field. All right, so an estimate of what we've, okay. Okay, I'm getting some figures in.
I mean, I'm happy to approve the 750 and then be willing to review this at a different level. I mean, I feel like we're putting Amy really on the hot seat here.
That's why I suggested maybe
So-
we approve the 750 now, and if she can come back with some more concrete numbers before 6 o'clock, it's 3:01. Yeah, I'd be willing to support an amendment for a condition, the way you're, an amount to be conditioned, the way you're talking about.
Let's do that. I think we're,
Okay. So then do I have and that will actually be in two parts. Do I have a motion to approve a $750,000 additional appropriation for the Greenwich High School remediation project?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So motion made by Ms. Moriarty, seconded by Nisha Arora. Those in favor? Okay, so that motion passes 4-0-0. Just hold on, Amy. So what we are now going to do is we also have to pass the source of funding for the remediation. So we have a bonding resolution for the GHS remediation in the amount of $750,000. Do I have a motion to approve that?
I'll make that motion.
So Leslie Moriarty made that motion.
I will
and
second.
Nisha Arora seconded it, and those in favor? So that motion also passes 400. So earlier, Amy, you weren't here because of these are special meetings and the timing and so forth. We aren't making a decision between routine and non-routine. Dan has the chairman has listed these as non-routine, but I would say that if you think you need an additional appropriation, that you should return, but I'm looking to the chair who's nodding his head yes.
Yeah.
So if
I
you
figured I'd
want an
come
additional
tonight.
appropriation, then
Yeah.
you would be expected to return this evening at 6 o'clock. And what if she doesn't want, what if 750 is satisfactory?
I figured I'd be here tonight if anybody has other questions and things like that, but you guys can tell me. But I think
Just to jump in, I think that, I have high confidence both caucuses will support this, so in that sense, I'd like to save Amy the time. I am just kind of mulling over the fact that there was, a significant discussion here, but I would lean towards not asking Amy to come back, but I think it's kind of a close call here, given the kind of conversation. So what do you guys advise?
The only issue is, I think that there's real merit in considering an additional appropriation that's conditioned to account for the planning money she needs to get started for the fiscal '25 work, as well as potentially an additional contingency for the work number that she's got here, because there's no money left afterwards. So my guess is that there'll be some questions about that, since,
Okay.
we'll never
Amy, I'll
know.
talk to you,
Yeah.
after the meeting, and we'll come up with a plan.
And
Thanks.
I appreciate all I know this is an unusual one, so appreciate everybody's flexibility and jumping right in and trying to help us with this. I think we're all hoping to see it get done, and if we can do something that lets us condition it, I'm delighted to keep bringing you the information on tonnages and what's going on out there, and bring you that. We need to get the drone out again too, because if you saw the drone pictures, I have to see if there are any, because Nisha, you might enjoy some of those. When you see them, you're like, holy mackerel. It's a little easier than trying to tromp through the site.
So I do have a question about the whatever they were, those maps that you were showing.
Right, they're hard to read.
Is that something that you can provide, Roland, or you prefer not to?
They're really hard to read,
Okay.
but we can probably, happy to walk people through them and
Okay.
explain what they mean. And
Oh, okay, great. So I think, so thank you, Amy, and we'll see what, if anything, is produced in the next 3 hours.
All right.
Or probably a
All
little
right.
less than 3 hours would be
Yeah,
better.
that's all
but,
right.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
For joining us, and thank you, Mr. Siciliano, too. So we now get to the next part of our agenda, and I'm just going to read here that we have ED1 for the Board of Education, an additional appropriation for Central Middle School for $42,017,000. We were requested to put this on our agenda, and we have put them on our agenda, and we have agreed that discussion and vote will be deferred to the full BET meeting, since that meeting is scheduled for 6 PM. It says the same day, but just later today at 6 in 3 hours. And likewise, there's a bonding resolution for Central Middle School, and so that is the Finance Department. And the accompanying financing also has agreed that discussion and vote will be deferred to the full BET meeting, since that meeting is scheduled for 6 PM, again, later today, and just fewer than 3 hours. So do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion made by Ms. Moriarty, second by Ms. Aurora. Those in favor? 400. So that was a Unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And the meeting is over at 3:07. Thank you.